Welcome to Restoration Global TV. We are Apostles Efren and Dr. Jen Fernandez, and we are honored to have you with us today. This platform was created to bring hope, healing, restoration, transformation, and leadership empowerment to individuals and families through real conversations, powerful testimonies, biblical teachings, and faith-centered encouragement. No matter where you are in your journey, we believe God is still writing your story. So subscribe, share, and join us as we grow together and impact this generation for the glory of God. Now, let's get into today's episode. Okay, babe, so from Central Florida to Hawaii, what is like rebuilding life from scratch?
Man, it's like, when did it first start? All right, so talking a little bit about the transition from Florida to Hawaii.
Well, what can I say?
Just thinking, it really has, in many ways, came out of nowhere, right? And then it also was like, God had been talking to us for some time about shifts, changes, so much that we've lived in our years together. But I would say, particularly since COVID, like monumental things had occurred, right? During COVID, right before COVID, Sammy came into our lives, and then COVID, and then Brianna, and even before Brianna, career changes, all kinds of crazy things was going on that just were significant. But I never would have thought Hawaii, right? And then just how God used work to open up that path. And I remember the first time I got the application that this was a position. And, you know, there was a part of me that kind of thought, I think you might have even asked when this position became available for, you know, Hawaii, because it was remote. I think we had a brief, almost like passing convo around, maybe I would work from Orlando, right? It was almost like, maybe that possibility existed.
I remember the first time you spoke to me about the opportunity in your job. I know that I remember you being a little unhappy with some of the things that were happening, and we've spoken about that. And then when you came up that opportunity, the first thing out of me was, everything was screaming, no way, I don't think so. There was no way in my mind that this was gonna happen. It was a no all the way. And and I remember giving you all of the possibilities of what can happen in a negative way if we were gonna move. It's just a lot happening with our family, with our ministry. Things were just getting settled, and we were starting to get into a system going. Things were flourishing financially and everything, and then on top of that, our parents were going to health problems. For me, there was no way that we were moving.
Which is funny, because so many times, enough times at least, in the last, 6 years, there was opportunities for us to leave. We were at one point potentially looking to move to Virginia. There was North Carolina. There was like these moments where it was like a consideration. But Hawaii, it's not something that we ever like seriously sat down and said our life is likely to be, in the Asia Pacific area. Certainly not. Like, if we were going to go anywhere, it was going to be maybe, heck, even Puerto Rico, that you've got family, and we've got at least some roots there. Somewhere in the Northeast, but never Hawaii.
Yeah. But I remember that as time progressed, we began to pray, and I began to sink into the idea that this can potentially happen. And God, you have spoken about us experiencing ministry in a different way. Maybe I'm thinking about this in a way that I'm not supposed to. How about if I open up my heart to you and just allow you to guide me? And I think that's what happened. God started then to, when I opened my heart to it, God then started showing me the possibilities of this will happen, and I have opportunities for you guys, right? I have open doors for you guys. And so it became more of an obedience type of thing. And we need to speak to a lot of people, and that's not gonna be easy conversations, right? So I guess I just allow myself to give in, or to surrender to God and what He had, right, for us at this point. I remember at that point, a year before, when we went to Colombia, and in Colombia, God spoke to us several times about us, Him sending us to Asia, to the area of Asia, because He was gonna lift us up as prophets in that area. And I received the word, amen. And probably to your point that you always said, we always thought that we were gonna go to many different places. We just never thought that it was us moving into into a place. We always thought that Orlando was gonna be our home base all the time. So yeah, when all this started getting into fruition, and I realized, you're sending us to Asia Pacific. You are fulfilling the word that you spoke over us a year ago. And that's how the progression started. And so God did, I was able to sink into what God was sending us to do. It was more the emotional part of it that it was very difficult, saying bye to our loved ones, hearing the voice of God, because I think that that's the most important thing, is knowing that God used your job as a means of moving, but it was ultimately God sending us. So what are your thoughts about that?
It's funny, whenever someone asks me, what brought you to Hawaii, right? What's the most common thing? The most common thing that people think is, you must be military. But whenever I get that question, which seems like it's always asked, right? What brought you to Hawaii? When we tell someone we came from Florida, my answer's always the same. I always say, God used the vehicle of my job, Hilton, to bring me here. Because I really believe that God's plan for us was always to bring us to a new land. And I would never have thought it was Hilton and that it was Hawaii, but God used Hilton to bring us to Hawaii. God chose this land. I would not have scripted this. I would have thought our land was going to be somewhere in the Northeast, somewhere in Puerto Rico, maybe even Texas, all lands that are familiar to us. But God chose to bring us to an unfamiliar land.
Uncharted territory,
total uncharted territory. But, I believe that God is still revealing exactly what that is to us, right? He's still showing us exactly what it is that we are to do here. But what we know is this: we know that God had been speaking to us for some time, that a move was coming. God had been really letting us understand and know, right, that a change was coming to our zip code.
What were the pivotal moments that you said, God, you speaking to me, you spoke to me? Like, there's something that comes to mind vividly that you say, there's no question about it, this is God.
Well, there's so many little things that had occurred throughout the past several years, right? From us no longer operating in the sphere of just pastoring in the brick and mortar, right? Inside a church, which is it's been such an instrumental and pivotal part of our life together, right? We started in ministry in 2009, just we had just celebrated our 4-year anniversary of being married, and God launched us into ministry, and we knew that was going to be part of our lives. And you and I always had this thinking that, at least for me, let me speak for myself, I always thought that I was going to, we joke about this now, but I always thought that I would be that pastor that would be at a church, at a congregation, at a building for 60 years, right? That would be me, that I'd be the one, that the pastor.
A staple in the city and.
Yeah, which is not to, demean that at all. Not even one bit. That, in fact, anyone that God calls to do that is a blessing to the city and community. Because that's what I thought. That's what I aspired, right? That to me was the top of the top, the best of the best. Like success in ministry, what was it defined as? Part of it was you're going to be in that church. People are going to say, Pastor Efren has been here for 60 years, pastoring this congregation. I remembered him when he was just a youngin' preaching, and now he's old with white hair or no hair. That was what I thought. That's what I had always thought ministry was. And of course, over the past, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 years into ministry, what I began to understand and have key insight from God is that my calling was a little different.
We were supposed to experience ministry differently.
In a total different way than my ancestors.
And boy, he had to take us through a process for us to understand that.
Well, it was a crushing to me, right? I just needed to be completely broken from a thinking that, while not wrong, wasn't mine. But that's normal, right? Most of us tailor our lives around what we see, what we know, right? That's built into society. So it's just, to me, that was the norm. And nothing wrong with that, but that's not the norm that God wanted for me. And so it over the course of years, God speaking into our lives, God speaking into me, that he would be taking me and withdrawing me from the norm, taking me and withdrawing me from the land that I know. I just always associated that to missionary work. I always associated it to, God had moved us to South America and other, lands. I just kind of assumed that I was going to be doing ministry in other places, just like an evangelist or missionary, go for a period and home.
Come back.
Home was Central Florida. Home was, our roots are in the Orlando metro area, right? So our first church launched in Kissimmee, and then out in St. Cloud and Davenport, and just branching out to other areas of, quote, the mainland. That was just really the thinking for me. And so for God then to create this path into a land that is quite literally an island, and not an island called Puerto Rico, where you're from, not an island called Dominican Republic, where my family's from, not an island that's familiar to us, but God decides, I'm going to transport you 4,000 miles away, and I'm going to use a vehicle that leaves it undeniable, and that vehicle is going to be called work, because God knows that what I commit to, I commit to. God knows that when I go all the way. And so I knew that God had opened the doors back up in bivocational work for me, right? So I knew that God had opened up this path at Hilton, and God decided, well, it's not going to be in Orlando, where I had an opportunity to stay in a similar role, but I knew, I'll never forget something, right? I'll never forget that when we started this path and the application was sent and I submitted it. And I remember saying to you, yeah, it's probably not for naught, but just explore. Which I'm not that kind of person to explore, which is just an oddity when you reflect on it, right? Anybody that knows me, I'm not exploring things, I'm doing things, right? We're gonna do, not try, right? I always say, don't try, do. But when I started this process, I remember you told me, right? I remember you saying to me, the decision is gonna come down to you. You're gonna have to decide whether it's Hawaii or whether it's right here in Orlando. But that was the thing, is how do I know throughout all this process, there was this guiding light within me? Because I'd already known that God had spoken to us, that there'd be some significant shift. God had been speaking to us for I don't know how many years about our physical home changing. That we weren't going to be in this home for much longer.
Yeah.
And we had already transitioned out of, where we were just pastoring the flock to pastoring pastors and to leading pastors and to leading ministers and planting churches. And that was okay. So I'm accepting what you've called me to do. And I love doing what God called me to do. But now it's okay, I'm going down this path. And every step in this, I took.
So the first thing was, out of the crushing, the first thing was getting you to accept, okay, this is the new norm. I'm experiencing ministry a different way, right? I'm no longer going to be a pastor that is going to be in the one church.
I'm no longer going to be what everyone expects me to be.
Right. Because
that's a different conversation altogether. The amount of people that didn't agree, accept at all the path that God had taken me down, right? Not at all.
That was a challenge.
Some of them said it to me, some of them said it to others, but there was a lot of chit-chatting going on, a lot of talking. But to this point, getting back to this point, meaning I bring that up because it was through all that the only peace that I would find at times is, okay, what God is doing and what God is moving.
Hearing from God.
And every step along the way, every step from God speaking to me, God speaking to me in prayer, God speaking to me through his word, God speaking to me through you, God speaking to me through other vessels. Every step along the way didn't just include that, but then God using platforms that are the rocks. That if the people won't speak, then God will use rocks. God using people that have nothing to do with the work of ministry to show the path that he was walking and that he had set me down to walk. And so every step along the way at work just was like, okay, this is it. So before we get into like, how's it been here? Just the idea of we move, and that whole process was just, wow, a story in and of itself. But remember, I got here and I was alone. So those first few weeks were just consuming myself with work. And that was a difficult time, right? Difficult time for our family, right? We were back in Florida with our kids, trying to, what are we gonna do with our home? Everything happening around us. And then knowing that, oh yeah, I'm also gonna be 4,000 miles away. It was definitely a challenging moment.
We decided nope.
So we advanced the timeline, right? You ended up coming out right before Christmas. And we were originally thinking, I remember when I had the tickets, I think it was sometime in late January, mid-January. I know it was right before your birthday, but it was different. When did it get real? Because you obviously knew of the possibility when I first referenced the job opportunity. But did you have like, oh my goodness, this is literally about to happen? Did you have a moment where it was just like, this is happening? We're going to Hawaii. Yeah. Remember what that was like?
When you left. When you left, I'm like, oh, there's no turning back now, we started moving the things out of the house. And I remember before that, I always used to tell you, I don't know why, but we're supposed to move from this house. And it's not because I'm ungrateful or nothing like that. I just think that there's something different for us, and I didn't understand what it was. And I remember telling you, I don't know, but I think I'm gonna start making boxes because we're going somewhere. And so it was just funny. But the day that you left was a pivotal moment for me, that I said, oh my, there's no turning back. This is just it. And obviously when we start moving our things out or giving things away or selling things, that the house began to be empty. I'm like, okay, this is becoming real. This is a real thing.
And so what was it like when I'm gone and, okay, this is a real thing? Like, what were those first few days like that you now knew, I'm making this transition, I'm uprooting my norm? Like, kind of, how do you remember, like, the emotional roller coaster, the conversations? How'd you deal with that? And how were those first few days?
It was mixed emotions for me, because at one part I was excited. It's exciting. Everything new is exciting, and I'm like, I'm about to experience something different, But at the same time, and on the other hand, is really thinking about family, ministry, everything that we do have, and knowing that once I find myself here, without that is so precious to me, it was going to be really hard. So I was battling with all of that. But at that moment when you had left here to Hawaii, I was there by myself with the 3 kids. It was challenging. It was very challenging, because then I was in charge of moving the rest of the things that we needed from the house. Thank God, I cannot say I was by myself. I had, some help. But I was charged of with the responsibility of moving everything from the house and empty the house out completely. And then I have the 3 kids. And so they are already out of their routine, their norm, that made it extra difficult. And at that point, we also had, we were transitioning to transfer our car here. So we have another car that was, that we were hoping that it worked, but it broke down on me too. So I have no car. I'm transitioning. We're sleeping out of air in air mattresses, and the house is completely empty. The kids are going crazy because they're out of their system, their routine, everything. And I'm here pulling my hair out. I'm like, and I remember when I used to talk to you, you're leaving the excitement of being here in Hawaii and showing me things and stuff like that. And I'm there talking to you all frustrated, like, I am so sorry, but it's so difficult for me right now to be excited with you. Because I felt like there was a mountain of things that I still needed to do in this transition. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel a little resentment, because I'm like, how is it that he is over there enjoying life and I'm here stuck with all of this? This is crazy. And but the time that the car broke down on me, I'm like, this is it. I am stuck in the middle of the street with the 3 kids, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. And so we have decided together that you were gonna leave first, and we, I was gonna stay back for like 2 months to get things settled and stuff like that. We immediately figured that was not a good idea. And I said, when the car broke down, I said, you know what, if I'm gonna struggle, I'd rather struggle with my husband over in Hawaii and cut this thing short and just leave. Because I just, in my mind, I thought, well, I think that the struggle is going to be different, because now we're setting things at the house. We're getting the kids into the routine. They don't miss their dad as much. And, and I'm back with my husband. We're struggling together, And then I have no car. I have no car. I have this, I have that. And I just want to be able to just go and be with my husband. So it kind of like rushed things, but at the same time, and now looking back, I believe it was a godly thing that we actually made that decision to accelerate things, more. So
how were those moments when you talk to like your dad, or talk to your brother, or talk to one of your spiritual children, and just told them that I'm leaving, particularly when in many cases they thought you would be staying until mid-January? Do you remember any of those convos, and how was it?
Yeah, well, actually, it was, I think that all of my conversations with anybody, the hardest one was always my dad. Just because of what he's going through. And, my children are his only grown children. And so, just the thought of taking that away from him, far away, it is still a challenge for me. But I guess knowing, I think you said it before, really knowing that God was in the midst, that God was the one who was calling us to what we think uncharted territory, that he was calling us to pivot to something that is so unknown for us. Knowing that he was guiding our step was the thing that I have to lean on and trust, right? But when I spoke to people, especially to your mom or to, Apostol Aline, when I told them about, hey, plans had changed, I am leaving earlier. Obviously, people were a little saddened, but then people immediately, especially those two, Apostol Aline and my mom-in-law, they're like, oh my gosh, we were hoping that you would do that. I don't understand how you stay behind this time. That's when I knew, this was a bad idea, me staying behind, So having their support was a good thing, in that area. And I think that people also knew that people saw the struggle was real. So people also knew that this was something that needed to happen.